Hello and welcome back to P.I.M.S episode number 8. Today, I want to talk about environment, right? So last week we spoke about trauma and how trauma can affect how you develop as an individual and how trauma can actually affect whether you succeed or not, right? And one of the traumas that we spoke about was external trauma and how the environment can cause you external trauma by virtue of you being in an unstable environment, whether that's a home environment or even something as bad or unchangeable as a country, nationwide, or even a global environment, right? We just experienced a pandemic where we essentially couldn't even leave home. So that could be a cause for trauma as well, because many people experienced very terrible things during that time. So today I want to talk about your environment as an influence in how you can become successful, but more specifically in how you can become creative, because I'm a creative person and I mostly want to speak to musicians, but don't worry, because even if you're not a creative person, I think this will still apply to you. So I want to talk today about 5 things in terms of your environment. I want to talk about your physical environment. I'm going to talk about your psychological environment. I want to talk about the emotional environment. I want to talk about the social environment as well as the spiritual environment, right? So I want to talk about those 5 things. So stick around and let's get right into it. Right, so the physical environment is probably the most obvious thing, right? So I remember one time someone asked me the question, T, how do I get to become creative? Like, how can I make myself write more music? How can I make myself write better music or write poetry? And I said to them, listen, well, what is your environment like, right? What is your physical environment like? You know, I know that for me, I get up and after I have my breakfast, I'm normally sitting at my desk, right? And when I'm sitting at my desk, it prompts me to actually log into my computer and actually do stuff on my computer. So by virtue of me being on my computer, it means that I have to work, right? So that's one way that I prompt myself just naturally, just normally, to have my environment set up where it's conducive for me to just work. Now, I had a thing a few years ago where I actually got rid of my TV because I noticed something. I was like, you know what, as soon as I get home after work, after a long day, the first thing I do is I maybe grab a drink, grab a snack, and I sit down and I switch on the TV. And what was happening then is I noticed that I was spending a good maybe 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 hours just sitting there looking at the TV, looking at this box, program after program, movie after movie, sports channel after sports channel. And then you don't realize it, but then you look at yourself and you go, wow, it's already 7, 8 o'clock at night and you haven't actually done anything. You haven't done your chores, you haven't made your dinner, you haven't, done your work, maybe you haven't finished up certain things, or maybe even you haven't dived into your hobbies during that day, right? So I remember making the commitment to myself to say, look, the TV is obviously a hindrance for me. Now, if you have great control and great restraint and you can just not look at the TV or just switch it off and just leave it there, then kudos to you. But I know that for me, for myself, I had to literally get rid of the TV physically. I had to get rid of it out of my house so that I had nothing else to look at. So when I got home now, I would be sitting there on my couch and thinking, okay, I'm sitting, what am I gonna do now? I'm gonna rest for like maybe 30 minutes. And then after that, I'll have to get up and sit on my desk. Now, here's another thing that I actually did. For the longest time, I've always had a work desk because I feel like if I'm sitting down on the couch, for example, if I have my laptop and I try to work at the couch, my mood's just not right. I'm sitting in such a comfortable position that I actually am not as productive as I would like because I'm so comfortable, right? I end up just kind of relaxing and, before I know it, I'm looking at my phone or something, I'm kind of daydreaming because the couch is so comfortable. But having a desk is one of those things that just kind of prompted me to go from that comfortable environment on the sofa, on the couch, to actually sitting on my desk and on my computer and saying, listen, you're already here anyway. You're in the perfect environment to work. And so I got that computer, and just to make it a little bit better for me, because I noticed that I was spending so many hours at work, I actually got myself a very nice chair as well, which I treated myself to, because I would spend like 5, 6, maybe 7 hours sometimes just sitting on my desk. So if you're struggling to be creative, if you're struggling to be productive in any sort of way, I would say the first thing you have to do is check your physical environment, whether it's conducive enough for you to be productive. So small things you can do, I'll give you a few tips on this, is maybe removing your phone away from you. So when I go to sleep at night, I leave my phone outside of my bedroom. So the first thing that I do in the morning is I wake up, I look at my actual watch, and then I actually go and have to get my phone outside. So that means I don't wake up in the morning and look at my phone for the next 30 minutes to an hour. That used to be another bad habit that I used to have. But keeping your phone outside of your room actually helps you out, right? Keeping an alarm, an analog alarm, keeping it in your room, but keeping it far enough that you have to get up out of bed to switch it off. That's another pro tip that you can actually use to be more productive and to make sure that you actually get up and don't switch the snooze button on, right? Because I know that sometimes you just kind of wake up and you go, oh man, snooze, and then you doze off for another 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, right? And that's not what you want to do. You want to get up and be productive, right? So if you want to be productive, set yourself up to be productive. And the key thing with all this stuff, guys, is to think about how you want your morning to start the night before, right? So when I leave my phone outside of my room, I think about it the night before and I go, I'm going to put my phone on silent or on vibrate, and I'm going to leave it outside of my room on do not disturb mode, and it'll only ring after 8 o'clock in the morning, for example, right? Or I'm going to put my alarm 5 meters away from me where I have to get out of my bed and actually press that alarm and switch it off. By that time, I'm already up and I don't feel like going back to bed anymore because I'm already up and I'm moving. Keep a bottle of water next to you as well, right? So when you wake up, you hydrate and you're ready to go and you're not feeling so drowsy and lazy, right? So those are just a few things that you can do with your immediate physical environment to make sure that you're ready for the day, that you can be more creative and that you can be more productive, right? So another key thing with being productive, especially being creative, I'd even say, is that you don't have to wait for inspiration, right? When you have your physical environment set up in this way, you almost kind of physically prompt yourself to do certain things, right? To get into habits. And creativity, surprisingly enough, comes from just having good habits, right? So I would produce music a lot of times because I'm sitting on my computer, I've got my piano right in front of me, I've got my guitar right next to me, and trust me, at some point in the day, because you're looking at these things all the time, you're gonna think to yourself, maybe I should just play some music, maybe I should just write some songs, maybe I should just kind of record some music to see what happens. Now here's the thing, right? You can always be stuck in the thought process of, if I'm being creative, I have to create something that's good, I have to be motivated to do so. That's not the case at all. In fact, most of the time, when I go into a session or any sort of productivity mode and I just start working, sometimes some stuff comes out that you don't even realize. You weren't planning to make anything that was good. You didn't have any motivation, but the mood just takes you and you go. And then sometimes you have days where you try and produce something and nothing happens, or you make a terrible song and you're just like, that was a bad idea, scrap it completely. But what's important here is that you're maintaining the habits, you're maintaining the good practices, and you're maintaining the sharpness to show up. Because that's another key important thing, is just merely showing up physically and just doing the thing is far better than not doing the thing at all, right? So if you have a workout routine that you want to develop, if you want to read more books, maybe if you want to study more, if you want to work more, just show up and promise yourself that you're going to do maybe a 10-minute workout, and promise yourself that you're going to write or read 2 pages or 5 pages, whatever that number is for you. And before you know it, you're actually going to start to write more and more and read for longer and longer and work out for a much longer time. So that's a very easy way of just kind of making sure that your environment is set up for you to be productive or creative, right? Now, the second thing I want to talk about is your psychological environment, right? So your psychological environment is what you think about, right? This is tied into your physical environment as well. I'll always say that when I wake up in the morning, right, I want to fill my mind with the right thoughts, because my thoughts often become actions, right? So part of me getting rid of my phone out of my room is changing my physical environment, is making sure that I don't bombard myself psychologically with news and information the first time I get up, right? So instead of me getting up and being bombarded by messages and texts and requests and emails from other people and just kind of start to firefight and maybe get involved with the rest of the day and what other people's problems are, I actually start off the morning pretty quietly. I start off the morning with a lot of meditation. So I'm usually don't talk to anyone for like a good hour in the morning for the first time. If I'm going to listen to something, then I pick intentionally what I want to listen to. Something motivational for the day, maybe something on business, something that will actually lead me to the path that I want to go to, right? It's not just letting things hit me, but me actually taking things that I want to experience during the day and actually allowing myself to determine that by my own actions and intentions, right? So it comes back to that thing again of your physical environment, i.e. not having a TV means I don't just let things come and hit me, but I actually select what I want to watch, right? So even if you have a projector or if you have a TV in your house, try to actually stick to a program where you actually say, I've got maybe 2 hours of TV to watch or 3 hours of TV to watch. I'm going to be intentional with what I'm going to watch. And your psychological environment is no different to that, right? You have to think about, what do I want to feed myself? What do I want to put into my head? Because if I'm feeding myself the right thing, then I'm going to have a better mindset throughout the day. I'm going to have a better mindset to tackle the problems throughout the day as well. And if things happen that are maybe coming towards me that I didn't plan for, I can still handle them because I still have a plan in how to do that. That comes back to, again, the trauma. Remember, we talked about trauma and how to deal with trauma. One of the ways you can deal with trauma or surprises in life is to actually prepare for them before they actually happen. Now, this actually goes very well into my next point, which is your emotional environment. So now when we're talking about your emotional environment, what is that like? What am I talking about? I'm talking about how you feel, right? So oftentimes we are controlled by how we feel. whether that's emotionally, whether that's thinking about motivation to create, motivation to be productive, and motivation to do certain things. Now, we're human beings, and you cannot neglect the fact that you are an emotional being. So as much as you can will yourself to do things and psychologically think, yeah, I'm going to focus and I'm going to do this, sometimes your emotions get the best of you. And because your emotional environment, internal emotional environment, isn't particularly balanced, certain things can throw you off a little bit easier. So remember how I talking about the psychological issues, the things that are hitting us during the day? You can get hit emotionally as well with things that you might not be expecting, some bad news maybe, or maybe even some good news, and then you completely forget about the things that you're supposed to be doing because you're so excited and you forget to be really productive. It's something that I've had to catch myself with a few times where I've had to go, T, we just had some good news. We just had a big win here. Now, that doesn't mean that because you've won in this particular area, that things are just going to continue to happen all on their own, right? It's a very common thing. In fact, it's happened when I was playing sports and I was playing a big tournament. And I remember in this tournament, I beat someone and I won a game against someone that I really had beaten me like most of the time. I won against this person. And because I was on such an emotional high, right? I didn't allow myself to control that emotional high. I allowed it to control me. When I went into my next game, I was so supercharged that I actually lost control. I couldn't think. I couldn't strategize. I suspected or I expected that next game to go just as well as the previous game, and I actually lost to someone who was much weaker than the person I'd played before. And this is quite common in sports where, a team has a very big win, they win a championship, they win a title, and then the next season they completely struggle, they completely fail to perform because they were on such a high that now coming back to perform at a lower level just feels like, well, I'm not really motivated to do this. So controlling your emotional environment is about not just controlling the negative aspects of your emotional environment, but controlling the positive aspects as well, right? So when you do have a big win, you don't over exaggerate, you don't over celebrate, you kind of take it in and quickly move on from it and go, okay, we've done that, we've won this battle, now what's the next thing, right? Famous leaders and very prominent leaders have actually talked about not allowing yourself to get carried away once you've had a win, but going on for the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. This doesn't mean that you don't celebrate, because you must celebrate. It's important to stop and reflect and celebrate certain things with your team, with your family, with your people and your friends, but you can't allow yourself to just fall into that mode where you're thinking, I'm going to keep celebrating and I'm going to keep feeling good, because at some point the good feeling will run out. And when that good feeling runs out, it's important for you to actually be able to maintain that motivation, to maintain that good feeling. And here's the thing, right? In life, I think one common mistake that we make is that with our emotional internal environment, we feel like sometimes we must always be happy. Now, this is very confusing because I feel like people in this current generation are like, well, if I'm not happy, then I must be doing something wrong. Sometimes you don't have to be happy. Sometimes all you can be is just okay. And it's okay to just be okay. It's quite perfectly normal to just have a normal, boring day and not have anything going on. There's nothing wrong with that. So when you're having a boring day, or even when you're having a period in your relationship with your partner or your spouse where you're just feeling a little bit bored, it's like nothing's particularly happening, don't panic. It's quite all right. It's quite normal. Learn to accept that and actually be content in boredom. But allowing yourself to experience boredom while continuing to be productive, while continuing to be motivated, is a practice, right? This is why I start off with the physical aspects of it and the psychological aspects, because if your physical environment is set up for you to be productive, it doesn't matter whether you're motivated, whether you feel like doing it, whether you're bored of doing it. The fact that you have committed to this certain thing allows you to continue to do the thing that you're meant to do. So if I'm in a relationship with someone, the fact that I'm bored and maybe I'm not finding them particularly interesting today doesn't mean that I don't treat them kindly. It doesn't mean that I treat them poorly, right? It doesn't mean that I just kind of neglect them and say, I don't want to speak to you at all because, hey, I'm not excited about you today. And so by actually having good practices in our relationship, it means that I can actually fulfill my duty in my relationship, whether that's with my friends, whether that's with my family, or even at work. I can still perform at the highest level because that's just what I do, right? So make sure that you don't allow your emotions, whether negative or positive, to actually control your actions, to actually determine where you're going to be. Because here's the thing, if you allow your emotions to control you one day, then the next day, then the third day after that, it becomes into something more than a one-time experience. It becomes a habit, right? And those habits become actions that actually determine your destiny and where you're going to end up in the end. So have that practice that kind of keeps you emotionally in check. Now, I'm going to give you a little tip here as to what I do to control my emotions when I've had a big win or even when I've had a big loss, right? I always think it's very important to reflect, but not to spend too much time ruminating on what's happening, right? So this goes into the psychological aspects as well as emotional, because your actions and what you do, including what you think, becomes your actions, and what you think also becomes something about a feeling, right? So when you have something happening, I think it's important to just quickly reflect on it and go, what's just happened here? I've lost something or I've won something. Let's just say, for example, because a lot of us go through loss, I have had a very bad experience with this thing. How do I deal with it and move on in the quickest way so that it doesn't affect me long term moving on? One of my daily rituals, one of my daily practices is taking a cold shower every single morning. Now, here's the thing. Cold showers have been proven to lower your cortisol level. So your cortisol is when you're feeling pretty down. When you're asleep, we release a lot of cortisol. It helps us relax. It also makes us feel very, very drowsy and doesn't allow us to be aggressive and have action, right? So when I have a cold shower, right, it literally has a chemical reaction in my body, which kind of forces me to feel less depressed, right? So no matter how sad I felt, the fact that I start taking a cold shower makes me feel like, poof, I'm ready to fight the world now, because I've just had this cold shower, and physically, physiologically, and actually chemically in my body, I'm actually telling my body to go and start fighting. So that's a nice little trick that I like to do. It keeps me moving. It keeps me psychologically, physically, and also emotionally in check. It keeps my psychological and emotional environment ready to go. Another thing you can do is just working out, right? So again, that physical environment thing. If I start my day by working out even for 10 minutes, that rush of blood just kind of releases the right endorphins to actually keep my body going and to actually motivate me into doing more. Now, here's what I'm going to say about this. I've got the guilty habit of actually working out until I'm completely knackered and tired. Now, you don't have to do that, because if you do that, then you'll actually be so tired that you can't actually be productive throughout the rest of the day. So I encourage you to try working out just for 15 minutes, maybe, or maybe for 30 minutes, and maybe a low intensity. Like if you do a 10-minute workout, then you can do that at a high intensity. It's up to you, depending on what your fitness level is and what you can handle. But my point is this. Don't work out to the point where you're physically exhausted and so tired that you actually are drained, right? You just want to work out enough that you release the chemicals, you release the blood flow, you increase your blood flow and release the chemicals in your brain and in your body to actually allow you to actually overcome the day emotionally and psychologically, right? So that is the third thing, which is your emotional environment. Now, the fourth thing I'm going to talk about is your social environment. Now, human beings, we are physical beings, and we have a physical body that we use day to day. We connect with each other intellectually, psychologically, and also emotionally. But after we do that, right, after we have all these physiological needs met, right, the intellectual, psychological needs met, and the emotional needs met, we can do that on our own. But what we need more than that is a society, right? We need to be around a certain environment, which is our social environment, which allows us to actually become more productive and maybe even more creative. So I'll give you an example. I live in London, right, in the UK, and London in the UK is a very vibrant area. It's a very cosmopolitan area. There's a lot going on in London and in the UK. So when I have a plan, for example, with my business, 7th Century Music, we deal with music artists a lot. So if I want to meet artists, I know exactly where to go. I know some artists, I know some producers, I know people who run labels and run events. I can just go on my phone and just go, hey, what's going on this weekend? Oh, this is going on. And within 30 minutes, I can be there and actually be part of the crowd. So there's a key component here of, becoming productive, becoming actually creative, that at some point, even though you can do the other things by yourself, you actually need to be around people who are doing the same things or near enough the same things that can allow you to continue to be productive, that can allow you to be creative as well, because those people will give you the ideas and the mindset to actually dive into different creative arenas or dive into different productive arenas where you can actually be pushed and to grow a lot quicker and to move forward a lot quicker than you would have done if you were just by yourself. So if you don't have the social environment, right? So I know certain people who have moved from further up north and just moved to London because they wanted to be where the buzz is. They wanted to be where the right kind of music scene is for their type of music to actually thrive. And a lot of people do that for work as well as for other things in life, which is even finding a partner, right? If you're in a geographical location which is primarily an older demographic, you might want to move to a different town where there's a little bit of a younger demographic around your age group where you can actually start to getting into that dating scene. So yes, sort out the psychological, sort out the physical, sort out the intellectual and the emotional, but the social is actually super, super important. So don't neglect that. In fact, I would say after you've done all the other things that you can do by yourself, then it's very necessary to be around the society that is doing the things that you want to do and you want to achieve in the long run. So don't neglect the society. Remember, all the things you can do, it's very tempting to just stay online, to whether it's online dating, whether it's producing your music just online, whether it's just kind of releasing your music online. It's very tempting to just stay there. But I encourage you to actually take it one step further and to come out of that environment and to look for a society, right? Look for a community that would actually help you thrive and grow in your endeavors to become either creative or more productive. So if you want to perform, if you want to meet more producers, meet more songwriters, the best way to do it is to go out there Meet them face to face and just go out and have a drink. And you'll be surprised at what happens. I've made so many good friends just by being out and meeting people. And honestly, I'm an introvert as well, right? So I'm not an extrovert. I'm more of an ambivert, more like, but I'm more introverted than I am extroverted. But trust me, once I'm in the right group with the right people, I can become very extroverted, right? So don't let that be a crush. Don't say to yourself, I'm an introvert T. I don't like to speak to people. Trust me, I am an introvert too, and I can do this. If I can do this, then I think you can do it as well. It just takes a bit of practice, right? So that's the fourth thing, which is your social environment. Now, the fifth thing that I want to talk about is your spiritual environment, right? Now, this is called philosophy in music and spirituality for a reason, because I believe that we are spiritual beings. And because we are spiritual beings, I believe that in some way, in some shape or form, we have a spiritual element to us that sometimes if we don't pay attention to, we can have all these other things, right? But we just fail to feel fulfilled, right? So if you're having a crisis, for example, in life, maybe you got a good job, your physical aspects of life are taken care of, you got food in your belly, you got your psychological aspects taken care of, you got your emotional aspects taken care of, you got a good social structure taken care of, you got a community there, but there's something that just feels like it's lacking. Sometimes I think that thing can be spiritual. Now, hold on, don't switch off right now, because I know some of you are thinking, oh, he's going to start talking to me about Jesus Christ.
Jesus is Lord.
You know, I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm talking about from a spiritual point of view is that you must have a spiritual relationship with self. Now, my personal belief is that when you have a spiritual relationship with self, that allows you to connect with anything, including other people. Now, if I'm a spiritual being and you are a spiritual being and you're aware of your spirituality and I'm aware of my spirituality, guess what? We can be misaligned in so many other things, from our psychological, from our intellectual to emotional, to even our social aspects. But if we're spiritually aligned, guess what? We can have a very, very good relationship. I've met people who are of different faiths, of different religions, and to my surprise, right, we had nothing in common. They came from different countries, they had different hobbies and different interests, but guess what? We just got along because we had a spiritual connection. And although we believed in different religions at the time, we actually were able to connect because I recognized them. I was like, yeah, I feel your spirit and you feel my spirit, and we actually get along. And on the flip side of that, I also remember meeting people who I had the same hobbies with. We did the same thing, came from the same background, but there was just a disconnect. It's a spiritual disconnect. You know, for some reason we just couldn't get along. It just was aggravation all the time. And I was like, this is weird. We have so many things in common, but we just don't get along. That's because we couldn't connect on a spiritual level, right? So when I'm talking about your spiritual environment, it kind of talks about, leans into that social environment as well. But I'm going to talk about it in two parts. There's an internal spiritual environment that we must maintain. This is the relationship with ourselves. So I told you at the beginning of this video that when I wake up in the morning and I'm setting up to start my day, one of the things that I do, even in my physical environment, is that I meditate, right? I kind of communicate with myself, and I communicate with the powers that be, the higher powers, and the powers that I believe are out there to help us. I believe that there's something that guides us. You don't have to be a Christian or Muslim or Buddhist to actually connect with this power. We're all able to tap into this cosmic being, right? Whatever it may be. And so if we are able to take a step back and connect with that cosmic being and just kind of, reflect on what's going on in the world and what's going on in your own life, I believe that can actually help you in so many ways, in terms of answering certain questions, in terms of finding out what to do about certain things, and finding out which step to take next. Now, if you have that relationship with self, that means that when things happen, you are less likely to be swayed, right? Because you have a good balanced self. You have a good balance in yourself and your spirit. You're not going to waver too much because you know yourself very, very well, right? This is beyond just taking care of your body physically. It's about not just the psychological and the intellectual and the emotional. It's about the spiritual aspects. You can just say, do you know what? I know you're saying this is good for me, but there's just something I'm not feeling about this, right? So it goes into that thing of intuition, choosing whether you want to work with someone or not based on intuition. That's because you have a spiritual knowledge of self. And so when you have this spiritual or even intuitive development inside of you, what tends to happen is that you can then discern a lot better who to be around and who not to be around. And trust me, this can be the difference between your success or failure in so many ways. How many times when we were growing up as kids, when we didn't necessarily have this spiritual relationship with self, and we just did things because, hey, we go into school, we play sports together, we go to the same church, we got the same parents, we got the same family, so we're just gonna hang out together. But because we weren't using that spiritual discernment, we end up getting ourselves in some sticky situations, right? Some things you couldn't recover from. Or maybe you go into a relationship with someone who, in hindsight now you look back at it and go, man, me and that person were never aligned, right? Me and that person, we were never even on par spiritually, but for some reason, because I found them so attractive, I found them so funny to be around, I just kind of hung around them, and then it ended up being a very traumatic experience that I really shouldn't have been in. Or sometimes you might say, man, I really knew that I shouldn't have been with this person. My intuition told me this was the wrong people to be around, wrong person to play with, but I just couldn't stay away. I should have listened to my intuition. I should have stayed away. And because I didn't, maybe you're suffering the consequences of that, right? So I hope that you have good spiritual discernment, that you have a good relationship with self spiritually, because by having a good relationship with self spiritually and understanding yourself, that's the way that you can actually define and actually start to say, because I'm spiritually aware of myself, I know who to be around, I know how to be around them, and I know who not to be around, and I know which things to get into and which things not to get into. Because there are so many things in life, including just, your work relationships, your personal relationships, maybe business endeavors, maybe things that you want to actually approach and attack in life, that you're going to have a ton of options to choose to go for, or maybe to not go for. And it's important for you to actually have the discernment, right? To be able to, the intuition or the discernment to actually say, that's not the right thing for me. I know it looks good on paper, but it really isn't the right thing for me. And I can't tell you why, but it just isn't for me. And so that's one of the key ways that you can have your spiritual environment, your internal environment, which will obviously outwardly manifest itself into your relationships with people. It will manifest itself into so many other things like your work relationships, your love life, and everything else like that. So I encourage you, if you haven't already developed a relationship with self and maybe defined yourself, define that intuition, maybe you might be young, or maybe you might even be a little bit older, but you haven't fully defined for yourself, what does it mean to you to be spiritual? And again, this does not mean you have to be religious, doesn't mean you have to go to church, but it just means that you have an acknowledgement of the spiritual nature, the spiritual being in yourself, which I believe is very, very active. Sometimes when you know it and when you don't know it, but if you have a better understanding of it, it will guide you a lot better and you're able to make better decisions as you go throughout life in general, right? So I hope you enjoyed that. It actually turned out to be a lot longer than I expected it to be, but I hope you enjoyed this little talk about the environment. Now, as I always do in philosophy and music and spirituality, everything that we talk about comes back to music because that's what we do as a company, 7thcentury.co.uk. If you are an artist, a musician, a singer, a songwriter, a producer, and you want to be in the right environment, you want to create the right environment for you to succeed, then 7th Century Music is the place for you. We've built a software that allows every artist to actually essentially go into there, put their music on there. And when you put your music on the platform, it's actually able to tell you exactly who is interacting with their music and how they're interacting with their music. In other words, you can see the names and the emails and which country those people are from. Now, this is very, very important, and this is what I like to start with, because from this point, then you can really figure out exactly what you want to do with those people. Do you want to have a live event with those people? Do you want to have a recorded event with those people? Do you want to sell them your recorded music, your merchandise? Do you just want to talk to them and one-to-one, just as I'm doing with you, whether that's virtually or even that's live, right? In whatever format that you want to do that. But that all starts with having the right information and the right data. Now, our platform is also meant to do this thing in a very easy way where it actually allows you to make more money with your music this way, without streaming your music, without putting your music on Spotify or Apple Music or any of those other platforms, but by simply being able to have the information that you can really act upon. In order to get you to the next phase and in order for you to help you understand exactly where you might be on this journey, we've actually created a 15 video set of courses that we want you to watch. And this is going to help you define exactly who you identify as and what you identify as, and whether that identity is the right identity for you. I'm going to guide you through those sessions, and we can talk within our own Facebook groups, within our own networks. You can just message us here on YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook, is where we're mostly active. And we can have that discussion about your gifts, your talents, and your skills, and where that lies for you as an artist and how you intend to thrive with that information. So if you're interested in seeing more of that course material, then just sign up in this link. It's completely free. It's 15 videos just for free. And we are going to be extending those videos and making more of those types of videos to actually teach you more about different areas of all the music side of things, starting from the production, the songwriting, the marketing, the sales, and the fulfillment that we actually believe that artists need to have, including the mixing and mastering. So that's the 6 principles that we focus on for every artist. So if you're one of those artists who's still trying to figure it out, or maybe you're disillusioned with the way that things are, and maybe you're not sure on where you should go, then I think that's a very good place for you to start. So check out that link. It's completely free for everyone to start off with, and you can actually try our platform and see if that works for you. And also reach out to us on our social media channels and see if we can help you along on your journey. If you want to know more, simply put your question or your comment in the comment section down below, or simply reach out to us at our Facebook page or even on our website at 7thcentury.co.uk, and simply type in your message in the chat bar and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Okay, so join us in the Facebook group, like and subscribe, click that notification bell so you can be notified anytime I release any one of these videos. I look forward to seeing you then. All right, take care. Bye-bye.